stop sharing so that you can. There we go.
Sounds good. Thanks, Erin. I'm going to share my screen with everybody. Um, while I'm doing that, I am going to just jump out of this and make sure that I put um, the link in for everybody here in the chat. And I'll put it in at the end for uh, for this presentation, just to make sure that if as I'm presenting. Um, as I go through, some of these links, and sometimes the presentation can just seem like it's whipping by, and I want to make sure that that you will have access to all the resources that I point to, and access to this presentation in particular. So I do like using the captions, so I'm going to use the Google captions here. Um, to let's see, it's not captioning, so let's see if oh, here it is. So as way of introduction, I am Rob Piorkowski. As Aaron mentioned, I am an instructional designer with SUNY System Administration, SUNY Online, and I have been serving our faculty and campuses across the SUNY system for the past 20 years. And I've also been an online instructor. I taught online for 16 years, elementary French. And and I've done, I've used discussions in my online course quite a bit, and I've helped others use discussions as well. And as Erin mentioned, I'm a strong advocate for discussions in an online course. Um, because I do think that use of student to student interaction, and that's what I like to call it, because discussions, the word itself is, has sort of a very social context, not as academic as some other terms that we use for instructional strategies. Um, but when designed properly and implemented properly, discussions, do sort of open this new window for instruction in regard to student-to-student interaction. Because we can monitor everything that happens online between students, um, we can leverage the discussion forums to actually have students teach each other and riff off of each other in a classroom in a very visible and accessible way. And so, as the slide, mentions here, what I recommend you use the discussions for in Brightspace, or anything that you use for students to interact with each other, such as Packback, or or there are lots of different apps out there now for students to interact with each other. Um, what I recommend is that you dig deep into your discipline and into what you're teaching your students, and think about how professionals interact with each other, and do your best to try to emulate those types of activities because they're authentic. And in the professional world of the discipline, um, proven collaboration skills, even in an online course, inside of a particular topic of study, can be very valuable to students, and very valuable to employers. Um, and um, some questions that, as you if you building discussions for the first time, or you're an instructional designer, you're helping faculty build discussions for the first time, some things to think about are, again, how do professionals interact in the real world? In my discipline, what is some criteria that I can put on this type of task that makes it as meaningful as possible? Um, how can I connect this type of interaction to my learning outcomes? And what kinds of critical thinking are necessary for my discipline? So beyond identifying and recalling things about what I teach, how can I get students to move to the next step? What are some of the questions they should address? What tasks would bring them further along in thinking about my discipline and applying some higher order thinking skills to what they're learning. All of these are quite visible in discussions. Again, when they're designed well and aimed at getting students to produce some new ideas, fresh ideas, um, new takes on a certain topic that you may be addressing in your courses. So just some elementary uh, things that we've learned, some best practices that we've learned over the years that I think might be helpful for you in terms of, again, creating a discussion for the first time, or just improving upon the discussions that you may already have. Um, Students always talk about expectations, understanding expectations. When I say students always talk about it, every single year we run a student panel. Um, and we ask students, and we gather information actually all year long from students about their experiences in online courses. And one thing that always bubbles to the surface is about understanding the instructor's expectations, either in particular activities or throughout an entire course. So when we do get down to designing a discussion, that's something that we want to keep in mind. What are my expectations as an instructor of student performance? And so a lot of this, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, is about rubrics. So if I can create a rubric that has very specific criteria and can um, can describe exactly what I'm expecting from students, that is extremely helpful to the learners when embarking on a discussion, because students don't necessarily know how to respond to each other in a discussion forum. Again, that word discussion kind of works against us because they think that they simply have to share their thoughts. However, if as instructors we guide them with some very specific goals of a discussion and some very specific behaviors that we want to see them um, uh, demonstrate in a discussion, then um, the outcomes could be very fruitful. And there are some instructors that have replaced the writing of papers with um, participation in discussions in their online courses, because if there's enough um, room for thoughtful thinking and learning and writing in a discussion forum, it will take time for students to maybe to read other students discussion posts and um, to create something new and fresh if that's part of our criteria. So again, we'll take a look at some of the criteria in a few minutes and examples of criteria. But what I'd like you to think about, if you're an instructor and you're participating in this presentation today, I would like you to think about where can I find value in students interacting with each other? Because in an online course, we have, again, this unique opportunity to evaluate and monitor student interactions with each other. So the questions I'd like you to be, sort of thinking about is, what can students learn from each other? And how can they teach each other in my course? So just to back up for a second, I do in terms of those expectations. Usually in a discussion design, there is very clear directions for students as to what you expect from their initial prompt and then what you expect from their responses to each other. Again, these some of these are not obvious to students, so we really do have to spell them out for uh, for our learners. So, an initial prompt is usually one that invites a variety of responses. And so, what we want to avoid is a prompt or a question that has a single answer. Because in a class of 20 students, if the first three students answer a close-ended question, as we call it, then discussion's over. There's not much to discuss. So if there are lots of uh, answers or approaches to an initial prompt, then we're on the right track in terms of inviting a variety of responses. And students get to see what other students in the class think or thinking, or see different approaches to an initial prompt. Now, an initial prompt could be a question, but it could also be a task. It could even be asking students to generate questions on their own. Again, anything that you can conceive of where that, of course, is directly connected to your discipline, but where students can, maybe do a little research, bring in a personal experience, um, but uh, respond to a task. Again, it could be a question, it could be a variety of things, and really make it their own and present that into the class as the initial prompt. Then there's lots of fodder for students to exchange ideas around things. So usually the way we design a discussion is usually in two parts. What we want them to do initially with the discussion, and then what we want them to do with each other, how we want them to respond to each other. So, I came across this verbiage really from a faculty member quite a while ago, um, and it's very useful. And the reason why is because initially, maybe about 20 years ago now, when we started these discussions and started promoting student-to-student interactions in courses. Um, One of the guidelines that we weren't aware of right away were ones around consistency of participation. So in our first sort of rounds of using discussions in online courses, students would come in at the very end and then post their 6 required responses. Um, and so in re- uh, in response to that, what we did is we started coming up with guidelines for consistent participation. And I don't remember which faculty member created this, but we've been using it ever since, and it works really well. Now, discussions usually unfold over a 10-day or 14-day period. So usually over an extended period of time, there's give and take. Uh, and students are given time to create not only just an initial response, but also responses to each other. So because they unfold over again, usually about 2 weeks. Um, to avoid having students just come in at the last minute and put in their required responses, we started to see these type of guidelines as a very effective practice. And as you can see, and I know I've given you time to read the slide while I'm talking, if you give them, uh, timely milestones or benchmarks for their participation, um, it works out very well in terms of students participating consistently in a discussion. So we certainly want to be clear about the grading process, that discussions are worth grades. And then we want to get a little more granular and give them guidelines around consistent participation. So as you can see here, uh, make requiring them to respond within 2 days of the discussion opening up, and then giving them guidelines as to how you want them to respond to each other. And these are just temporal guidelines, if you will, about what is due as they proceed, through the discussion and or through a particular module or unit that they're in. So again, that's all part of being, very clear about how we want students to approach these discussions and how we want them to succeed. Um, and again, um, the question I want you to, sort of, keep thinking about again, if you're an instructor, is, you know, uh, where in my course can I have students actually teach each other things? Because, as most of us know, an effective classroom is where students are engaged as much as the instructor, if not more. And so you want them doing most of the work, not you. Um, one thing that we want to be clear on is that the instructor is not um, there to answer the questions, if you will, that arise in discussions. You want to be really clear that you want students to um, respond to each other and as best they can, and that your role in the discussion is usually a guide on the side. You will be evaluating them, um, but you don't want to come in and give the definitive answers when if there are any in a discussion. You want to guide them and you want to help them if anyone derails or perhaps gets too emotional or something like that. You do want to step in at those points, but for the most part, you want them to teach and learn from each other. So Carlo's asking, do I suggest requiring a minimum number of posts? I do. I would yeah, I would usually require first an initial post, and in a discussion that spans the length of a module or unit. In our SUNY system, we've been promoting 2 weeks worth of content per module. I would usually require 6 to 8 um, responses. I also provide a rubric, and I'll show you the rubric. 6 to 8 responses that conform to the rubric. If students want to add more to that, that's fine. If they add a response that says, right, I agree, that really doesn't count as a substantial submission. So I try to be very clear about what is a substantial response and what is just a social response. And social responses are encouraged. That is part of back and forth. They just won't count toward credit. So what I try to do is be clear about credit bearing responses and responses that are not credit bearing. So here are, a few types of traditional activities that work very well in online discussions, um, debates, case studies, peer reviews, interpretations. Please remember that in in Brightspace, I'm going to show you how to create a discussion in Brightspace in a few minutes. Um, in Brightspace, students can, and Blackboard and other learning management systems, students can provide attachments, links, and all of those kinds of things. So students, can be encouraged to bring in artifacts into the discussions. Meaning that if at FIT, for example, there are lots of online courses whereby students create art or they create something, and they're encouraged to bring it into a discussion so that other students can see and comment on it. That would be, something like peer review. Um, and to that point, one thing that I haven't mentioned is that in an online course, it the discussion activities are one of the few places where students can actually quote see each other. So um, it really it's because a discussion is a communal document. When we think about the experience of our students in an online course, sitting at their computers, many of them, can easily feel isolated, and so it really is in a discussion where they can see each other's names, and they can connect with other students. So again, if you feel that if you're creating an online course and you're or even if you've already you've been teaching for a while and you feel like students may have a sense of isolation, you certainly might want to include a few discussion activities, either graded or non-graded, in your online course. So there are some non-graded discussions that different than what we're looking at on the slide here, that work really well in terms of establishing a sense of community in your online course. So, what comes to mind for me is in an icebreaker module, the meet your classmates discussion. For the past 20 years, we've been promoting uh, an icebreaker module in every online course so students get a chance to practice some things, have all the textbook information, the syllabus information. Um, and get to really just have a chance to get to know each other a little bit and get to know the instructor and that kind of thing. And in that icebreaker module, we usually have what's called an icebreaker discussion, sometimes entitled "Meet Your Classmates," and that's real helpful for some students. They want to feel part of a cohort. Other types of discussions that are helpful simply for building a sense of community would be something like a bulletin board. If you want to just have a regular just a discussion place where students can post things of their interests that are not necessarily connected to the course content, that's fine. Actually, that's very helpful. Um, I used to have a suggestion box that where students, you have the ability to create an anonymous discussion as well, where students could contribute suggestions to me to improve the course. Um, Things like that. That's perfectly doable as well in your online course. Yeah. John is putting in the chat that there's no right way to do discussions. Agreed, John. I don't want to sound restrictive here in my presentation. Certainly not. Um, I need what again. I want you all to ask yourselves what's going to work for me and my students and my content. Um, sometimes discussions go well beyond a module, or sometimes they're really short. What you do want to, be clear on is your expectations. So, um, and John's putting a really good post in the chat here. Um, when students are clear on your expectations of their performance, things usually go pretty well. It's when they're not clear about what exactly you want that they run into a little bit of trouble. So let me just, yeah. So I just want to give you an example of an effective practice that has worked pretty well for us, and it's about creating a two-part prompt. As you can see here, this was a course that I created for instructional designers quite a while ago, and really what I want to draw your attention to on this slide. I know this might be kind of small for some of you to see. Um, but I do want you to just see the design. It's a two-part prompt where I do a little bit of a setup, and then in terms of tasking the students, I try to be as clear as possible. Create an initial post, okay, and choose. They have to choose from a document that I provide a link to. They have to paste into the Brightspace here, and then they have to create 3 to 5 questions. That's their initial post. Um, and then I give them some guidelines to respond to each other. And so add a question, provide an appropriate response to a question, or help colleagues refine their responses and questions. So that is so I'm trying to be really clear about what I'm looking for in terms of them interacting with each other. Here's another one where I really just want to sort of highlight the two-part prompt here where I give them specific instructions on the initial post, and then I give them specific instructions on responding to their colleagues. One thing that I didn't see on the initial post, if some of you can see it, I have write 2 or 3 sentences. That's always good, by the way, when we design. Again, in terms of clarifying your expectations, some students will go above board and, or maybe even these days, use AI and generate, paragraphs and paragraphs of stuff where we really only want a couple of sentences. Um, and then how to respond to each other. Again, um, just drawing your attention to some of the verbiage here. I do like this sentence here. Below are some examples of replies that will earn full credit. Again, sort of differentiating between there are credit bearing replies, and then there are some replies that, perhaps add some social value to a discussion, but aren't substantive because I require substantive replies to each other. And just so you know, when you implement a discussion like this, it does take a little bit of back and forth with students to sort of pull them in line in terms of uh, clarifying your expectations. They can, like many of us know, they can be written down. They can be in an instructions document or something like that. But the first time through a discussion, students are still getting used to everything. So again, here on the second part, respond to at least 3 of your colleagues. Um, Numbers are good. So, okay, 3 of my colleagues, and I should probably include the total amount of posts that I'm expecting here. That may be in a different document. But sharing additional strategies, relating an experience, asking a question. So, in other words, if students ask a probing question of each other, I know that they have read each other's responses and that they are processing. And, asking a probing question really furthers the discussion and, sort of enhances the learning experience inside of that discussion. Um, I do promote as much as I promote the use of discussions. The second part of that is creating a rubric that that is used not only to guide students but also used to score the um, uh, the discussions and helps me as the instructor assess the students' performances and so you know, here I'm not going to read the slide to you, but for those of you, who haven't, used any rubrics, this rubric example is available through the presentation. There's a link here for it. I created this with SUNY Plattsburgh quite a while ago. It was a really neat project. I'm going to try to zoom in on it just so you can see, some of the examples here. Thanks so much, Aaron. Um, so here is a discussion rubric. Now, just so you know, I would have to, this is in a Google Doc. I would have to copy paste this into my Brightspace rubrics in order to actually use it for grading. Um, again, just to give you an example, now there are millions of these, literally millions, online. So this is really just one example. This is open for you to use. So this is openly licensed if any of you want to use it. But just to give you an example, I do criteria on the left, and this conforms to what the rubric will look like in Brightspace, this design here, and then performance levels across the top. So it's usually this exemplary column that I spend a lot of time with. So, what would exemplary performance be on this discussion? And what am I looking for? So, I'm looking for development of ideas, evidence of critical thinking, clarity, quantity. See, quantity is down here, quality of responses to other students, timeliness, and then this was for a nursing program, so APA style was important as well. Um, but as you can see, if you're able to read some of these, I usually, as an instructor, when I design a rubric, I spend a lot of time on the criteria and the exemplary column. Okay, really, what am I looking for? What's the best performance on each piece of criteria? And then as I move across the lower levels of achievement, these usually riff off of the exemplary behavior. So in this example, well-developed ideas introduces new ideas and stimulates discussion. And then here, developing ideas under proficient sometimes stimulates discussion, needs improvement, poorly developed ideas, which do not add to the discussion. Um, Actually, looking at that, I think I'd reword that now. So that's how we, usually create a rubric is we determine the criteria, we determine the exemplary performance on that criteria, and we try to fill in the exemplary column first, and then move across the rubric and try to keep similar wording across each row here for each piece of criteria. Okay. So again, um, I do want to sort of highlight the second bullet here about clarifying the instructor's criteria. Sorry, also the instructor role in discussion. Again, telling, making sure your students understand you are not going to respond to each discussion response that they enter, each submission that they make. That it is your job to monitor and evaluate them. And so, yeah, Michael, it would be helpful sorry, to provide examples of exemplary proficient needs improvement. Yeah, providing examples on a specific activity. The rubric I showed you was for a whole program. And so we were trying to come up with criteria and things that would apply to everyone's discussions. But providing examples of exemplary and proficient and all of those achievement levels would be super helpful. Yeah. And so Adele adds point values to each column to come up with a grade. And in Brightspace, when we look at the rubrics there, um, that will be available to us to actually put point values on all of these things. The rubric that I provided you there, again, was for a whole program, so instructors could use that rubric and then apply their own point values as they saw fit. So I do have a slide with lots of resources. I don't want to run out of time. Um, and so I encourage you to check out some of these resources here. Alexandra Pickett, the director of online teaching, she gathered these for me a while ago, and they're great links, each and every one of them. Um, if you're if you are thinking about that. What I asked you to think about during this presentation, how can I get my students to interact with each other in a meaningful way? The second link up here, the Bloom's taxonomy link, can help you with that. It does a great job of breaking down um, uh, lower level types of activities all the way up to higher order thinking of skills like application, compare and contrast, create, something new, um, synthesize, analyze. It does a great job of breaking down those skills. So, some of that can really be helpful. Okay, Aaron, there is a question, and so I'm going to flip over into Brightspace in a second. So let me take
Sure,
questions now.
sure. So one question that I think we may have jumped over, I'm not sure, from John, just wondering how much pushback students might give if they disagree, with your scoring.
Ah, yeah. I didn't get much of that. On the rubric itself, it does give you opportunity for feedback on each piece of criteria, even. It also gives you the ability, if you say that, let's say that timeliness was worth 10 or something like that, it does give you the ability to notch up um, each notch up or down each piece of criteria in the scoring process. So there's lots of, and I'll show you that in a little bit when I'm in Brightspace. Um, but I never get any real pushback. One of the things that I like to do, just so you know, and this is available in Brightspace, is you can grade by post. So as students are engaged in the discussion, you can score them while they're doing it. So a discussion. So if you require, let's say, 8 responses from students, as those responses come in, you can actually assess each response, give it a score. And so I really like that option because students have the ability to um, modify their behavior in the discussion, and maybe improve upon, what they have, what they've generated thus far. Um, and that has always proven itself helpful to me in terms of assessing students, being able to assess them right on the fly and not wait for the discussion to conclude. Um, but I haven't gotten that much push. I don't think I've ever gotten pushback on a particular discussion response. Um, and so,
And Rob, Gloria
yeah,
posted one strategy that she uses, and when you get into Brightspace, maybe you can show where to do this because I think this is
yeah.
really great. She posts a response to each student's original response to her discussion starter, but the point being that it lets students know that she's reading their post and allows to redirect if they need some sort of corrective,
Yeah,
measures in their statement. So, when you get there, showing where you can actually provide that feedback within the rubric. That's a
yeah.
great strategy.
Yeah, Gloria, as always, great suggestion. Um, just so you know, what I like to do is, again, I tell students that I'm not going to be in the discussion. Again, clarifying my role as the instructor, and this has only worked for me. I don't recommend this with everybody. You can use discussions in any way you want, any way you can conceive of students interacting with each other, being valuable to their learning. Um, but one thing that has always been good practice for me is I tell students that my role in the discussion is to monitor and evaluate them, and I will be doing that. And usually, as I start grading their posts, they see that I'm in there, so they're getting that feedback. I also tell them in the announcements that I have been providing them feedback in case they haven't checked and some of that is just scoring their responses. um, and what I also do is while the discussion is going on, I copy paste things, uh, usually just good ideas or helpful ideas that have emerged during the discussion, and I post that after the discussion has concluded, so that student and so I put together, sort of like best quotes from last module's discussion. I put that in the course and I link to it through the announcements, and students have always liked that because it just sort of reinforces um, what they what they accomplished, what was learned in the discussion, and reinforces that I'm paying close attention. Okay, so I know you guys are looking at Brightspace now, and I do want to go through how to create a discussion in Brightspace, and so. As you can see, this is a French course here. I use it for training quite a bit. And um, I have to go through this relatively quickly. We have 20 minutes, but there's lots of resources to teach you how to create a discussion in Brightspace. Um, and some of the features, if you use a different learning management system, um, then some of the features are sort of universal throughout. So I'm just going to go into my last module, Les Vacances en France, and I'm not sure if I have a discussion here. I do. I have an ask a question discussion. So again, that's one of those non-graded discussions that I keep going throughout my course. In every module, I have an ask a question discussion. Um, and what I would like to draw your attention to is that I said in every module I have an ask a question discussion, but in Brightspace, I only have to post one discussion. And then, I'm sorry, I only have to create one discussion, but then I can post that one discussion, like ask a question, in every single module. So for me, that's super helpful because I'm only moderating one single discussion, but I can post a link to it in every single module. And so let me show you how that's done. Um, you may have a different navigation bar up here, but I believe my discussions link is under course activities. In Brightspace, discussions have their own section, and it's in the discussion section. And so here are my discussions, and I'm just going to scroll down. I have a lot of them. So you can see I have a meet your classmates discussion, a talk with the professor discussion. Again, those are not graded. And I have first impressions on French cooking. Let's see. I have a film discussion. I have this kind of good discussion here. French are rivals, not enemies. Um, so I have lots of discussions already in here. Let me show you how to just create a new one. Again, we only have 15 minutes left, so I do want to show you. So in Brightspace, discussion activities are called topics. Okay, so the wording here can be a little confusing. A forum Yeah, Brightspace is set up to have a forum be an overarching title for discussions, and then has enable us to create several different discussions under one forum title. For today, I am just going to show you a topic because the topic is the actual activity. And let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to click on New Topic. And one thing Brightspace did pretty well is it created a one-page form with lots of features, and so I'm going to go through them today. So I'm going to call this one March Madness because where I am right now, our first days of spring are all about snow and wind and freezing temperatures. um, so if I leave this blank, so you see that I put in a title here, March Madness. Uh, if I uh, if I want to change the forum, I can create an overarching title and have several again discussion topics under that title. But if I don't change the forum, it is just going to use this name for both the title of this discussion topic and the forum. I'm sorry, it sounds very complicated. It's not. Just remember that discussion topics are the actual activities. So then I'm going to pretend that this is a graded discussion. I'm going to make this out of 100 points. And here in the description, this is where I would put in my guidelines for succeeding in this discussion. So that's where I would put that. And so we're not done, even though you might think we're done, but we're not. And then just so you know, Brightspace has, with these discussion documents, because they're somewhat elaborate, has the ability to save what I've just put in here, but it doesn't close it. As you can see at the bottom here, I have save and close, and I have save here. So while I'm working on it, if I like the guidelines that I put in here, I'm good to go. Some of you familiar with Brightspace might see that you have the full rich text editor in here, meaning that you can put in links, you can put in images, you can, this insert stuff button here in Brightspace is sort of like the magic button where you can add videos, you can add all kinds of multimedia links and stuff like that. Um, so that's all available to me. Now, when I go into availability dates here, each discussion has I have the ability to put in a start and end date in Brightspace. Just so you know, start means it becomes visible to students. End date means the link disappears for students. So just be careful with how you start these things, start and end these things. I'll start it today, and as I mentioned, discussions usually go 2 weeks. So I'm just going to make this a 2 week start date. Um, and this is kind of nice. I can make this visible with access restricted. So that's kind of nice before the start date. So if I wanted to make this visible with access restricted, meaning that students could see what the tasks are, they just can't submit yet, I could do that, which I have visible with submission restricted right here, or I have totally hidden, which is kind of good. Um, And then on the end date, I could do the same thing. Release conditions in Brightspace in general, what they are is I can create a set of conditions for this to become visible to my students. So like they need to score either 75 or higher on a previous quiz, or I have some kind of assessment, or they need before this that they need to succeed on before this opens up to them. I also have all kinds of group um, possibilities here. I could just make this a small group discussion if I want. If I had, or I have to already create groups in order to do that. So this is all about the availability dates and conditions. This is about post completion. So I have a few options here. Default participation, allow learners to hide their names. Learners must start a thread before they can view a reply to other threads. Now, some of you might remember this feature right here that I just read to you. Um, from Blackboard. If you use Blackboard, it was called a post first discussion. And what this requires is this requires students to create an initial prompt. And only after they create an initial prompt will they see the other students' submissions in a given discussion. So this is very popular. Yeah. Um, this is a very popular item right here. Yeah, and as Jessica's talking about, it cuts down on repetition. And this post must be approved before they display in topic. I leave that up to you. For me, in my teaching style, students kind of expect things to be public once they post them. This would require me, the instructor, to go in and approve each and every post before it becomes public. So that's availability dates, conditions, and post completion. So lastly is the evaluation and feedback. This is where I get to add a rubric to this, and I already have a few rubrics here. So I'm going to add an existing rubric, and I have one right here, a discussion rubric. I hope it's filled out. I'm not sure if it is, but that's how we add a rubric to this. And uh, and right here is about allowing the evaluation of individual posts. And again, that's something that I really like. And we have a few options here: average post score, maximum post score. Um, my favorite is sum of post scores. So what this means is that I add a point value to each score, and and then as those posts come in, I grade each post and with a single number, um, and that conforms to my rubric, and we take it from there. Allowing learners to rate posts, I never played with that. That was never part of my style. So that's So that's how that works. Oh, look at that. Include unevaluated posts. This is new to me. In the topic score calculation is 0. That's kind of nice. So when a student says, yeah, right, you just don't have to evaluate it. Interesting. Okay, so I set up my I'm all done with setting up my discussion. And after I set it up, lots of times when I create something in Brightspace, sorry about the scrolling. Yeah, it defaults down to the bottom of the screen whenever so shouldn't videos be embedded in students' posts so that the class does not open those in new windows? What are the best practices in this feature of online discussions? So, yeah, videos are great as long as students are able, to make them and post them. You do want to give, real explicit directions for each and every student to be able to do that. Um, there's a great, there are a couple of great video-based multimedia apps for that kind of thing. One that comes to mind is VoiceThread. Okay, VoiceThread and by nature sort of invites students to create videos and audio. Another one is called Padlet. And again, these are third-party applications that some campuses have adopted. Um, but yeah, Michael is coming up with a good answer to the question, and in part my answer. I would create in YouTube because YouTube is ubiquitous, and rather than dealing with embedding and teaching students how to embed, I would ask them to link, to a video. Um, but I encourage you guys to figure out whatever you think would work for your students. Okay, I got 5 minutes left, so I just want to show you how to put this in. I put it in my discussions area. I created a discussion in my discussions area, and now what I want to do is I'm just going to scroll down to that module where I wanted to put it, and just sort of closing the loop here on how to put it in one of my modules. Uh, Here in Brightspace, I navigated to my last module, which is Les Vacances en France. And so I then use the existing activities button. I go to my discussions. I remember that if I created it new, um, I can go all the way down and I'll find it at the bottom. Just remember, just like in Blackboard, when we create something new, it's at the bottom. I click on the link, and here I'm just going to click on the activity right here, March Madness, and there it appears in my Brightspace module here, and I can click and move it up, move it to wherever I want. Okay, that was kind of quick. I'm sorry if some of you were seeing this for the first time, but again, what you want to do is go to discuss course activities, discussions, wherever your discussions link, create it there, and then use the existing activities button in your course if you want to put it in a particular module. Okay, I'm going to end it there. I would like to know if what questions are. I haven't been able to keep my eyes on the chat as well as I'd had liked. But so, Erin, any questions bubble up that we can talk about in the last few minutes?
I think there were just a lot of good comments coming in about what folks do,
Oh,
and
cool.
some sharing about that. So,
Yeah.
but if anyone does have a question that they have been holding on to, please feel free to unmute yourself. You're welcome to talk, or type in the chat.
Do have a closing slide. So I'd like to thank everybody. Really appreciate you listening to me today, and your questions and input. All great. And just want to remind you that, here at SUNY, we have lots of resources for you. Um, uh, Please, I'll put the link in the chat again, just one last time, because I still have it in my clipboard here. And so if maybe I'll see you down the road. Thanks so much, and thank you, Erin.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right. Thanks, everyone.